The morning federal agents showed up at my family's office, I was the only one who didn't look surprised, because months earlier I had found the account they hid in my name and drained without telling me. And when I tried to ask, they laughed it off, said I was confused, said I had always been too emotional to understand money. And for a while, I almost believed them, until the numbers stopped making sense and the paper trail led straight back to them. So I stopped arguing and let the system do what I never could. And at 6:12 a.m., the raid started. Doors opened, laptops seized, and everything they built began to fall apart in real time. This is not just a story about betrayal. It is a revenge story where I never raised my voice and they still lost everything, including their freedom. And if you think silence means weakness, you have not heard the whole story yet. I am your host, and this is where it begins. Chapter 1. The Night They Laughed at Me. Some people don't belong at the table, my mother said, her voice light enough to sound like a joke, sharp enough to make everyone laugh. And they did. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough. Just enough for it to land exactly where she wanted it to. I kept my eyes on my glass, watching the way the light reflected across the surface of the water, steady and untouched, like nothing in the room had shifted, like I hadn't just been quietly cut down in front of people who measured worth in money and proximity to power. It was one of those private country club dinners my mother insisted on hosting, the kind where every detail was designed to impress without trying too hard. The lighting was warm, the table set with polished silver and crystal that caught every flicker of movement. Every seat was filled with someone important. And then there was me, at the far end of the table, exactly where I had always been. Across from me, my brother Ethan Calloway leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, like the room had been built around him. He smiled easily, spoke confidently, and people listened without interruption. Even when he said something simple, they treated it like strategy. My mother stood beside him, one hand resting lightly behind his chair, presenting him without needing to say it out loud. She lifted her glass again, continuing her speech as if nothing had happened. She talked about his leadership, his vision, the expansion of Callaway Biotech. She mentioned new investors, future projections, the kind of growth that made people lean forward and pay attention. Her words built him up piece by piece, turning him into something inevitable. Then, someone near the center of the table glanced toward me. A woman I didn't recognize, composed, observant, the type who noticed everything even when she pretended not to. She smiled politely and asked what I did. I opened my mouth slightly, but I didn't get the chance to answer. My mother did it for me. She gave a soft laugh and said I had chosen a different path, something more independent, less structured, not exactly aligned with the family's direction, but everyone finds their place eventually. There it was again, that careful, polished way of saying I didn't matter. A few people smiled. One man nodded like it made perfect sense. No one asked me anything else. I felt the familiar pressure build in my chest, but I didn't react. I had learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. It gave people something to confirm what they already believed. So I stayed still. I let them think what they wanted. They didn't know anything. They didn't know the email I received at 19, the one that told me my financial aid had been revoked because of discrepancies I had never created. They didn't know how many calls I made trying to fix it, how many documents I sent, how many times I asked someone to just look at it again. They didn't know no one ever did. They didn't know I lost my place at the school I had worked toward for years. They didn't know what it felt like to sit through lectures half exhausted, watching other students talk about internships and connections I was never offered. They didn't know because no one ever asked. And I stopped explaining. Ethan never had to go through any of that. Things were arranged for him before he even needed them. Internships appeared, introductions were made, opportunities aligned with his path like they had always been meant for him. My mother called it potential. I called it protection. I finally looked up, not at Ethan, at her. She met my eyes without hesitation, completely steady, completely certain. There was no guilt there, no hesitation, just the quiet confidence of someone who believed every decision she had ever made was justified. For a second, I wondered if she remembered, if she ever thought about that year, if she knew exactly what had been taken from me. But her expression didn't change, which told me everything. The conversation shifted again. Someone asked Ethan about valuation. Another person mentioned a possible acquisition. The room returned to its natural rhythm, smooth and controlled, like nothing had been disturbed. I listened, I watched, and slowly something else began to settle in. Because there were things that didn't quite add up. The way Ethan answered certain questions too quickly, the way he avoided details when someone pressed just a little further, the way my mother redirected conversations before they went too deep. Small things. But small things mattered. Small things were where everything started. I adjusted slightly in my chair, letting my gaze move across the table again, more carefully this time. Investor, advisor, board member. Every person in that room was tied to something larger, and for the first time, I could see the outline of it. Something structured, something hidden beneath the surface, something that didn't belong in a room this controlled. I took a slow breath, letting it settle. There was a time when this would have broken me, when I would have gone home and replayed every word, every look, every quiet laugh that lingered longer than it should. When I would have asked myself what I did wrong, what I needed to fix, how I could earn something that was never truly mine. But that version of me was gone. Because while they were building their version of success, I was building something else. I had spent years in rooms where last names meant nothing, where documents mattered more than reputation, where people who thought they were untouchable learned very quickly that they weren't. They didn't know that. They didn't know who I had become. They didn't know silence wasn't weakness. It was distance. It was control. It was the ability to stand in a room like this and understand exactly what was happening without needing to say a word. I lifted my glass and took a slow sip of water, letting the cold anchor me in place. They thought I was still the girl who sat quietly at the edge of the table, waiting to be acknowledged. They thought I was still the one who accepted whatever was given and stayed silent when it was taken away. They thought they had already written the ending for me. But they were wrong. Because sitting there, listening to them laugh, watching them underestimate me all over again, I realized something I hadn't seen clearly before. They hadn't just lied about me. They had built something fragile, and they had no idea I was already working inside the system that investigates people exactly like them. Chapter 2. What They Took From Me. The email came in on a Tuesday, right in the middle of a lecture I could barely afford to attend. I almost didn't open it. I thought it was just another update, something routine, something I could deal with later after my shift. But the subject line felt off, like it carried weight I couldn't explain yet. Financial aid status update. I opened it anyway. By the second paragraph, I stopped breathing. It said my application had been flagged for inconsistencies. It said my reported financial information didn't match verified records. It said my aid had been revoked, effective immediately, just like that. No warning, no conversation, no chance to fix anything before it was taken away. I read it again, slower this time, like maybe I had missed something the first time through. I hadn't. I left the lecture without packing my bag properly. My notebook slid halfway out. My pen fell somewhere behind me, but I didn't stop. The hallway felt too bright, too loud, like everything around me was moving normally while something inside me had just dropped out. I called the number in the email. 40 minutes on hold. When someone finally answered, I kept my voice steady. I explained that there had to be a mistake. I had double-checked everything before I submitted it. Every number, every document. The woman on the line didn't sound unkind, just finished. She told me the information had already been verified. I told her it was wrong. She repeated herself. I asked what records they used. She said she couldn't disclose that. I asked what I was supposed to do now. She said I could file an appeal. I did. I sent everything again: tax returns, bank statements, letters, anything that could prove I had told the truth. I waited. Weeks passed. When the response came, it was shorter than the first email. The decision had been upheld. No further review. No explanation. That was the moment something shifted. Not just fear, not just panic, anger. Quiet at first, but steady. Because mistakes get corrected. Systems have appeals. But this wasn't being corrected. This was being finalized, like someone had already decided the outcome before I ever called. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, staring at the screen until it dimmed, and for the first time, the thought crossed my mind that this wasn't random, that someone had made it happen. I called my mother the next morning. She answered quickly, like she always did when it was convenient. I told her everything. I asked if she knew anyone who could look into it, someone who could at least explain what went wrong. There was a pause on the other end. Then she said maybe this was a sign. She said maybe that school wasn't the right place for me after all. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I asked her if she even heard what I said. She told me not to make it into something bigger than it was. That was the moment I stopped expecting anything from her. After that, things became simple. Work, classes, survival. I worked mornings at a diner where the coffee was always burnt, and the tips depended on how well you smiled. I took classes in the afternoon. I worked nights stocking shelves at a grocery store where no one learned your name unless you stayed long enough to disappear. I slept when I could. No one from my family came to see me. No one asked how I was doing. Ethan called once months later, telling me about an internship he had landed through one of my mother's contacts. He sounded proud. I told him that was great. He asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. That was the end of it. Years went by like that. Tight, controlled, focused. I stopped thinking about that email because there was nothing I could do about it, until the day I saw his name again. It was early, just after 8, and the office was already moving faster than usual. People were talking in low voices, screens filled with reports, numbers shifting in ways that didn't feel routine. I logged in and opened the case file assigned to my team. A biotech company based in Boston. Rapid growth, multiple rounds of funding, irregularities flagged during an external audit. I started reading. At first, it looked clean, structured, impressive. Then the numbers started to drift. Small inconsistencies, adjustments that didn't match earlier filings, reports that had been revised more than once without clear explanation. Patterns. I kept scrolling. Then I saw the name, Ethan Callaway, Chief Executive Officer. For a second, everything in my body went still. I told myself it could be someone else. Then I saw the company name, Callaway Biotech. Not a coincidence. Not even close. I read faster now, scanning transaction logs, internal summaries, investor reports. Money moving in ways that didn't line up cleanly. Data points that should have connected, but didn't. This wasn't sloppy. It was controlled. I leaned back slightly, forcing myself to breathe. Think clearly. Treat it like any other case. But it wasn't. I flagged the file and stood up, walking straight to my supervisor's office. He looked up when I knocked. I stepped in and closed the door. "There's a conflict," I said. He nodded once, waiting. "The CEO is my brother." He studied my face for a second. "Have you accessed anything beyond your assignment?" "No." "You did the right thing." He reassigned the case immediately. That was procedure. No exceptions. I walked back to my desk, but the room felt different now. Sharper, closer. Jason Carter was watching me from across the aisle. He rolled his chair over slowly, stopping just close enough to make it clear this wasn't casual. "That your brother?" he said. "Yes." He let out a quiet breath. That's not the kind of coincidence people ignore around here. I didn't respond. He leaned in slightly. "Because if something comes out and your name is anywhere near it, this is where careers end. Not pause. End." I met his eyes. "I'm aware." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. As he rolled back to his desk, the weight of it settled in. Not just the case, everything around it. Because patterns don't start at the moment they're discovered. They start earlier. They build quietly. They get protected. I sat down slowly, staring at the empty space where the file had been. And for the first time in years, my mind went back to that email, to those numbers that didn't match, to records I was never allowed to see, the same kind of inconsistencies, the same silence. I felt it click into place, not like a theory, but like something I had already known and just refused to say out loud. Maybe the system didn't fail me. Maybe it was used. And if that was true, then what happened to me wasn't a mistake. It was planned. Chapter 3. The Truth They Buried. Something in me had already moved ahead of the fear. The next morning, the office didn't feel like a place where people worked. It felt like a place where people waited. Conversations cut off when I walked past. Screens were turned slightly away. Even the air felt tighter, like everyone knew something was coming, but no one wanted to be the one caught closest to it. Grand jury review had been pushed up. That alone told me enough. Cases didn't move like that unless someone upstairs had decided it needed to. I stayed quiet and did my job, but I watched everything. Jason found me near the break room, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "You hear about the timeline shift?" I heard. "They don't accelerate like this unless there's pressure. Or leverage." He gave me a look. "You sound like you already know which one it is." I shrugged, keeping my voice steady. "I know enough to stay out of the way." Jason didn't smile. "That's not what you do." Before I could answer, he added, softer this time. "People are starting to ask where you were on the early filings. Your name came up in an audit cost reference." That landed harder than anything else that morning. Why? Because the numbers didn't match, and whoever changed them had internal access. I held his gaze, not reacting. Lots of people have internal access. Not like this. He paused, studying me. "If there's anything tied to you, you need to figure it out before they do." I nodded once. "I will." But I already had. That afternoon, I stayed late again, waiting for the building to thin out. The quieter it got, the easier it was to think and to move. I logged into the system slowly, carefully, pulling up the archived audit trail I had found the day before. This time, I didn't just look at the numbers, I traced the access logs. Every edit leaves a shadow. You just have to know where to look. The modification timestamp matched the same window the data had been altered, but the user ID wasn't a name I recognized. It was a higher-level authorization, something routed through a financial compliance channel tied to external accounts. That didn't make sense, unless someone had routed it that way on purpose. I followed the chain deeper, cross-referencing the ID with corporate filings connected to the investigation upstairs. And then I saw it. A subsidiary account linked to a private holdings group, registered under a name I knew. Not directly, not obviously, but close enough that it made my chest go still. The same group tied to my brother's company, the same company now under federal investigation. I leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. This wasn't just about getting me disqualified. This was about moving money, positioning assets, clearing a path. And I had been part of that path, whether I knew it or not. I copied everything I needed, then logged out again, erasing any sign I had been there. Now I wasn't just guessing. I had something real, something they wouldn't expect me to have. The next morning, the tension in the office had shifted again, sharper this time, focused. I walked past the conference room and caught a glimpse of a few senior staff inside, including someone from compliance I had only seen in passing before. They weren't just reviewing anymore. They were preparing to act. Jason caught up with me in the hallway. "You look like you didn't sleep." I didn't. He hesitated, then said quietly, "They pulled more records overnight. Financials, external ties." "To who?" "They're not saying, but it's bigger than we thought." I let that sit between us. "Be careful," he added. "This kind of case doesn't stay contained." "I know." He searched my face for a second longer than usual. "You're already in it, aren't you?" I didn't answer. Because he was right. I had been in it long before any of them realized. That night, I drove back to the house again. I didn't need to, but I wasn't done. He opened the door the same way he had before, like he had been waiting. "You came back." "Yeah." We didn't sit this time. I stayed standing, holding on to the edge of the table like I needed something solid. I saw the access logs. He didn't pretend not to understand. And it wasn't random. It was routed through a corporate channel, one connected to Ethan's company. That made him look up, really look at me. "You shouldn't be digging into that. You shouldn't have let it happen." His expression tightened. It wasn't that simple. It was simple enough to change my life. Silence stretched between us again, heavier now. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said quieter this time. "All of it." He ran a hand over his face like he was trying to decide how much damage was already done. "Your mother believed aligning things early would protect the family. By cutting me out. By securing the future. For him." He didn't argue. Because there was nothing left to argue. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to him. "Then you already know this turns into." His voice dropped. "This isn't just about the past anymore. I know. And if you push this, it won't stop where you think it will." I met his eyes. I'm not the one who started it. For the first time, he looked afraid. Not for me, for everything else. I let go of the table and stepped back. There was nothing left in that house for me. Not answers, not family. Just confirmation. As I walked out, I felt something settle into place. Not anger, not even pain, clarity. For years, I had been trying to understand why everything had collapsed so suddenly, so completely. Now I knew, and more importantly, I knew how it connected to everything happening now. Back in my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine, the silence wrapping around me like it was waiting for a decision. But there wasn't one anymore. They had made theirs years ago. All I had done was finally see it. And now, for the first time, I wasn't the one reacting to what they had done. I was the one holding the piece they couldn't afford to lose. Chapter 4. The day everything collapsed. I took my time getting there, not because I was unsure, but because I understood exactly what kind of room I was walking into. By the time I reached the building, the city was already moving at full speed, but inside, everything felt contained, controlled, like the kind of place where decisions were made quietly and consequences followed later. The meeting had already started when I stepped in. No one looked at me. That was fine. I signed in, nodded to the assistant at the door, and took a seat along the back wall, just close enough to hear, far enough to be overlooked. Ethan was at the head of the table, relaxed in a way that only comes from believing nothing in the room can actually touch you. He was speaking when I walked in, something about projected growth and stabilizing investor confidence. My mother sat beside him, composed, hands folded neatly in front of her. She hadn't noticed me yet, or maybe she had and chose not to react. A man from legal stood near the screen, waiting for his moment. He didn't have to wait long. When Ethan finished, the room shifted, subtle but immediate. The legal advisor stepped forward. We need to address several financial inconsistencies identified during the latest review. Ethan didn't even turn. If this is about internal reporting delays, we've already handled it. It's not. That got his attention. The first slide came up. Numbers, transfers, clean lines connecting accounts that weren't supposed to connect. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Those are operational reallocations. They are not. The advisor's tone didn't change. Another slide. More detail. External accounts feeding into internal structures. Patterns that didn't belong in a company that claimed transparency. My mother spoke, her voice steady, but there was something underneath it now. There has to be a misinterpretation. These figures don't reflect our audited statements. They reflect what was found beyond them. The room got quieter. Not empty, focused. I watched Ethan's posture change just enough to tell me he understood this wasn't routine. "This is a serious accusation," he said. "It's a documented pattern." A pause. Then the advisor added, "And it didn't start recently." That was the pivot. The slide changed again. Older data appeared. Different formatting, different time, but connected. I felt it before I saw it. The document expanded. Names filled in, authorization trails, income adjustments. And there it was. My mother's name, Linda Carter. For a second, the room didn't react. Then Ethan turned toward her. "What is this supposed to be?" She didn't answer immediately. Her control slipped just slightly. "It's irrelevant." "It's not," the advisor said. "It establishes origin." Another click. The details sharpened. A financial adjustment tied to reported household income, routed through a corporate compliance channel. The same pattern just earlier. Ethan's voice tightened. "You're saying this has been ongoing?" "Yes." "And you're linking it to us?" "We are presenting the connection." Someone across the table leans forward. "This suggests premeditated financial manipulation." No one corrected him, because no one could. Ethan stood up abruptly. "This is out of context. You're pulling isolated data points and turning them into something they're not." No one moved. No one agreed, because the pattern was already clear. My mother finally looked at him, not with reassurance, with something closer to resignation. "This was handled," she said quietly. Ethan stared at her. "Handled how?" She didn't respond, and that's when everything started to shift, not loudly, but undeniably. Another board member spoke, his voice cutting through the room. "If this timeline is accurate, then this isn't just internal misconduct. This is exposure. Legal exposure, financial exposure, federal exposure." The words weren't said out loud, but they didn't need to be. Everyone in that room understood what came next. The advisor closed his folder halfway, then paused. "There is one more point that needs to be clarified." His eyes moved across the room and landed on me. "Miss Rowan Carter." Every head turned. Ethan followed their gaze, slower this time. And when he saw me, the expression on his face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not anger, not even confusion, recognition. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence settle, because silence in a room like this forces people to sit with what they're already starting to understand. My mother's eyes were on me now, steady, knowing. "You shouldn't be involved in this," she said. I met her gaze. "I already am." That landed, harder than anything else had so far. The board member spoke again. "You are directly connected to the earlier record." "Yes." "Can you confirm the validity of what's been presented?" I could feel Ethan watching me, waiting for me to step in, to soften it, to redirect it, to protect him. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I looked at the screen, at the document that had rewritten my life before I even knew it, then back at the room. It's accurate. The words were simple, but they didn't leave room for anything else. Ethan let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was nothing behind it. "You're serious?" No one answered him, because the answer was already in the room. My mother closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. "This was meant to secure the future," she said. "For who?" I asked. She didn't respond, because she didn't have to. Everyone understood. The advisor straightened, his tone still controlled. "Based on these findings, we are initiating a formal referral." That changed everything. Not later, now. Ethan's composure broke, just for a second. "You can't do that without full review." "This is the review." Another voice from the table added, "All related accounts will be frozen pending investigation." That was it. No raised voices, no dramatic exit, just decisions being made that couldn't be undone. Ethan sat back down slowly, like the weight had finally caught up with him. For the first time, he looked small. Not powerless, but no longer in control. My mother didn't look at me again. She didn't have to. The room was already moving on. Papers being gathered, phones lighting up, quiet conversations starting that would carry this far beyond this building. I stayed where I was for a moment longer, not out of hesitation, out of certainty. I didn't have to say anything else. I didn't have to push. The truth was already doing what it was always going to do. As I stood up and walked out, no one stopped me. No one questioned me. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped holding it together. And once I let go, everything they built started collapsing on its own. Chapter 5. What was left behind? It moved faster than anyone expected once it started. By Friday morning, the first story hit. It was direct, stripped of anything unnecessary. Financial irregularities, internal manipulation, federal review underway. By the afternoon, other outlets picked it up, each one adding more detail, more weight. By the end of the weekend, the company name was tied to something it couldn't separate itself from anymore. No one needed speculation. The facts were enough. Investors reacted the way they always do when uncertainty turns into risk. Quiet at first, then all at once. Calls were made, positions were pulled. Statements were released that sounded careful but felt like distance. I watched it happen without needing to follow every update. I didn't have to. The pattern was already clear. Ethan was out within days. Not announced as a removal, not at first. They called it a temporary transition, something procedural. But no one believed that. You don't step aside in the middle of something like that unless you're being pushed. My mother tried to get ahead of it. I could see it in the way her name showed up in statements, in the language that tried to soften what couldn't be softened. She reached out to people she trusted, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, something technical that had been misread. But this wasn't something she could redirect. Too many records, too many eyes. The investigation didn't slow down. It widened. Subpoenas went out. Accounts were frozen. More names surfaced, some expected, others not. The company didn't collapse in a single moment. It unraveled. Quietly, steadily, like something that had been held together too tightly for too long. I stayed away from the office longer than I needed to, not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't feel tied to it anymore. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for something to break or change. It already had. Ethan came by late one afternoon. No call, no message, just a knock at the door. When I opened it, he looked different. Not in any obvious way, but enough that I noticed. The confidence he used to carry so easily wasn't there anymore. "You are not going to leave me standing out here, are you?" I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure where he belonged in the room. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. "You knew this was coming." I shook my head. I knew something was not right. That is not the same thing. "No," I said, "it is not." He looked at me, searching for something he used to recognize. You could have told me. Told you what? That this would blow up? That there was something buried? I held his gaze. You never asked. The words landed heavier than I expected. He exhaled, looking away for a second before pacing once across the room. I did not know about any of that, he said. Not the beginning, not what she did. I know. He stopped. That was not the response he expected. You believe me? I believe you did not question it. He did not argue with that, because he could not. This is going to destroy everything, he said. It already is. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through. And you are just going to let it happen? I am not letting anything happen. I kept my voice steady. I am just not covering it anymore. Something in him shifted then. Not anger, not denial. Understanding. Slow, uncomfortable, unavoidable. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he nodded, like there was nothing left to hold on to. I really did not know, he said again, quieter this time. I know. And that was the truth. But it did not change what came after. He stood there for another second, then turned and left without saying anything else. No argument, no attempt to fix it, just acceptance. After that, things moved toward resolution. Legal proceedings took over. The company was restructured under oversight. People stepped down, some by choice, some because they had no other option. My mother's name appeared in reports more often than I thought it would, not as speculation, but as documentation. That mattered more. Reputation does not fall apart because of rumors. It falls apart because of evidence. We did not speak. There was nothing left between us that needed to be said. Weeks passed, then months. At some point, I realized something had changed, not around me, but in me. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. The need to explain myself, the need to prove something, it was gone. I went back to work, but not in the same way, not with the same weight attached to it. What I did now felt like mine, not something shaped by what had been taken or decided for me. The story kept moving without me. Updates came and went. People talked about it in the way they talk about things that used to feel close, but don't anymore. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like something had finally been put where it belonged. The truth didn't just come out. It stayed. One afternoon, I walked past the building again. The glass still reflected the city the same way, clean, untouched. But I knew what had been behind it. I kept walking, didn't slow down, didn't turn back. I didn't need them to see my worth anymore. I had already learned how to walk away without asking. The truth didn't just end their story. It finally gave me mine. If you knew the truth could destroy your own family, would you stay silent or would you let it take everything with it? If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.